Hello everybody, and welcome to a FunDaMental Games game preview. Today we're talking about Cleopatra Against the Gods. This is a game that'll be live on Kickstarter on Tuesday, February 25th, and it's been in the making for about 2 years. So what is Against the Gods? Well, Against the Gods is a miniature skirmish game with a mythical combat experience for 2 to 4 players. It would take about 45 to 90 minutes, and it's for ages 14 and up. And I believe there are some expansion pieces available right in the box when it's live on Kickstarter that could let you play up to 6 players. But we'll go through some of the components. We're not going to go through a full gameplay or a game scenario here. We're just going to do a quick overview of the game. So the battle is fought in the ancient world through some pyramids in Giza. And each player will have control over some factions from this ancient world, and they must synergize them to defeat the rest of the gods. The objective of the game is to defeat all of the opposing factions, which is determined by the number of people playing, and each god in a faction will begin with divinity points, which you must reduce to 0 by attacking them. So what we'll do is we'll go through each of the components and kind of describe to you what's happening here in this game. We have, and the game does have miniatures. Now I don't have miniatures shown in here, but the miniatures do look really good on the Kickstarter page, and I believe he's got some 3D models that are coming for that. So we'll talk about that in a second as well. But first we'll kind of go through the components here. Like I said, we've got the game board, which features a couple of pyramids, and the reason that these are important is because they do have a line of sight. So if you could kind of mentally envision these as being giant pyramids that you couldn't possibly see through, they create a line of sight obstacle for players. So if we were to take Anubis here, for example, oh no, sorry, this is Seth. So let's say maybe Seth was positioned here on this line, and maybe we have Cleopatra if she was over here. Because there's no line of sight for Anubis to go through this pyramid, you've got that red block there, that would mean Cleopatra could not be attacked. But if she were over here, then the line of sight opens up. So that's how I understand the way this game board works, is these red squares are kind of like line of sight blockages. So even if we were positioned maybe like so, and again I haven't played the game myself, so I don't know 100% exactly what you do to move your character, but if we were positioned even like this, Anubis could not see Cleopatra because of the pyramid. But as soon as you're in a spot where they can see each other, then they are vulnerable to attacks. So that's the game board, and players will move around on these white lines, and the only obstacles that could get between them are the pyramids themselves or having a player in between another player. So if we were positioned like this, for example, the line of sight for Anubis to see Cleopatra is blocked by Isis? Yeah, Isis. So there you go. Alright, so next up I guess we'll talk about the standees. So the standees would become these 3D miniatures in the real game, but as it is right now on Tabletop Simulator, I just have the access to the art files. So you can see here we've got Isis and Cleopatra and Seth, and then so there's going to be a standee or a mini for each of the characters. So that's the second component. We've got the game board, we've got the standees. Next we have the character boards, or the hero boards, or whatever boards you want to call them. Now I have them in Spanish right now, but they are coming in English as well. And so here we have Seth, really cool godlike figure. We've got Anubis, we have Bastet, we have Sekhmet, you already saw Cleopatra, and Isis, and Sobek, and finally Osiris. Now there are going to be a couple more that are in the Kickstarter page, but they're not available for this preview, and I think part of it might be due to unlocking them, or maybe the art is still to be finalized. So next up, what do we have? We have the character decks, or the player decks. So what would happen is players would control both of these deities, and then they would share a deck. So if we were to search through this deck, you would see that we've got both characters represented. We've got cards for I can't seem to scroll in on that, so we'll flip this over here. So we've got cards for Anubis, and then if we flip a few over here, you'll see that we also have cards for Seth. Now again, these cards are in Spanish, but you can see that the icons on them do change with each card, and those represent the difficulty when you're doing combat. They represent range, and they represent potential damage or hits. So each of the deity pairs has a deck of 20 cards, 10 of each deity. And so again, when you search through it, you'll see that it's half and half. They're evenly distributed, and the card images are the same as the images that are on the character boards. But each of the cards may have a different power and different strengths and abilities on them. So that is the cards. And then you'll see there are 4 d6s in this game, and d6s are used. I actually have them separated on the board, but they would be combined. And when you do an attack against an opponent, you will roll all 4 of the d6s, and they will be influenced by the type of attack cards that you use and the god that you have, and possibly the abilities that you have. We also have these tokens here, and these tokens are used as a way to have some influence when you are attacking, and that'll be described more in the rules. And then there's also lightning bolt markers or tokens, and these are used to show that as each attack that you make, your character will energize until they get to a point where they can go to what's called their kind of like an ultimate or a epic move, epico as it is in Spanish. I'm probably mispronouncing that. But that'll be an ultimate maneuver, will cause a significant damage to an opponent or a significant change to the board. So every character has their own individual epic ability, as well as their own special abilities that they'll have on their cards. And so that is the gist of the game components. So what else can I tell you about this game? Well, we talked about line of sight. We talked about how the game board influences. Each character will start with 6 divinity points, and those go down as they get attacked over time. And once a deity has gone down to 0, they are removed from the game. Each of the cards has a faction color. So as you saw, we'll flip this one over here. For Bastet, her faction is red. For Cleopatra and Isis, their faction is pink. We've got a black faction and a green faction. So top of the card is faction, difficulty level, then range, then physical damage, and then each card will have an attack name, an ability, and credits for art or whatnot. So that'll be neat. So 20 individual cards in each deck. I don't believe there is any repeats in the decks, and each player would end up starting the game with 4 and drawing 1 card per turn. And then how the attack works is the difficulty chart is going to be impacted by the number of dice shown on a card. So if a card has 3 dice, then the difficulty level of that card would be a 3. And so you'll see you throw as many dice as the difficulty of the attack to match or exceed the required total. If you succeed, you get as much energy as noted on the right of the chart. And so when you do attacks that have higher difficulty, you actually can score more energy, which is going to get you closer to your epic faster. And your epic has the most significant impact on the game. So as much as attack cards are important to hurt your opponent, your opposing deities, they're also important to raise your epic power and really have those giant impacts on the game. So I thought that's a neat little mechanic that Ruben and Ineffable Games put into this. So there you go. That's just a quick overview of Against the Gods. There's a ton of visuals to see here. And if you look at the bottom of his Kickstarter page, you'll see that he has demonstrated this game many times. I've seen him active on Facebook and Instagram for the past year and a half, ever since he got his game into a fully constructed state. And I know he has some really true physical components that he's played the game with. He's played with 3D models, he's played with his boards, he's played with the player, he's played with standees as well. And it's just really cool to see it come to life 2 years later in his first Kickstarter. And I have high hopes for him and what he can do with it. And look forward to playing the game one day too. I'll certainly be a backer myself. I just love seeing how somebody with a goal and an inspiration just works hard over the years and tries to build their own game. And there you have it, Against the Gods. And this is just one of several ideas that he has to implement other gods and other game boards. So really excited to see where it finishes off. All right. Thanks for watching a FunDaMental Games game preview. And if you like what you saw here, definitely support Ruben and Against the Gods and Ineffable Games and put a few dollars into his Kickstarter or buy the whole game. I think it's going to look tremendous on the tabletop.